Hide and Seeker by Daka Herman, published 2020. Children's horror, 308 pages. A game of hide and seek following the return of a mysteriously vanished boy has dire consequences. So, to give a brief synopsis of the plot, a boy goes missing over a year before the events of the story take place, and immediately after he gets back, I give it a couple days, I guess, his mom throws a welcome back party because he's not quite right. And his friends come and they end up playing a game of hide and seek, and like I said, this has dire consequences. And this is maybe one of the most interesting books I've read all year. Definitely one of the most unsettling books that I've read all year, without crossing the line that it's no longer appropriate for older children. But definitely I could see this giving some kids nightmares. So if you are going to read this to or with or recommend it to a younger audience member, definitely be ready to calm them down and remind them that it's just a book and that all the lore about the game hide and seek in this book is made up, and that they can play hide and seek without getting kidnapped and tortured. So yeah, this was a fun one. This was really good. It was extremely well written. The pace was incredible. Things start happening from the first chapter and they don't stop, and the characters were very competent. And I'm hoping that I can remember all of the characters' names because there were quite a few characters. It was a pretty extensive cast. Most of the cast was African American. There is one white character whose name I don't remember. Lyric. Lyric is the one white friend in this friend group. The rest are African American as far as I'm aware. And so we have a diverse horror story mostly featuring African American children, and it's just great. What an awesome entry into children's horror. This should honestly be a classic. This is Coraline levels. You definitely need to read this. This is creepy and unsettling and just well written, because the characters take initiative, and that is a problem that I have with so many books, is that the characters don't take initiative. They wait around for things to make sense. They wait for answers to come to them. Not these kids. From the first chapter, stuff is happening, and immediately these kids are trying to figure out what's going on, looking into any lead that they have, getting together and talking about, okay, what are we going to do? Let's go do that. It's basically the total opposite of it's the end of the world and I'm in my bathing suit, because where that book had a lot of really fun narration, but not a lot of action, this one is just go, go, go. And they pack so much content into 308 pages. I was amazed at how much they got into 308 pages. So let's get a little bit more into the main character and kind of the setup of this whole story. And this is the spoiler-free part of the review, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, don't worry. Just know that I absolutely loved this book. So our main character is Justin, and right around the time that Z, I think, is the name of the character who went missing, right around the time that happened, Justin found out that his mom was going to die soon from cancer, and he lost her as well as losing one of his best friends. And the friend comes back, but his mom is not, and he didn't have his friend with him to help him grieve. He was just going through so much at that time that not only did he not have his friend there, but he didn't know if his friend was also dead or alive, and just, he had no idea what was happening to his friend. And it was over a year, so that's a really long time. So this really delves into some very dark and juicy content when it comes to the kinds of things that the main character's going through, dealing with grief, dealing with loss, dealing with this fear of, losing anyone else who's important to him. And he is very much aware, like from early on, he walks into Z's house and he's looking around like, okay, something has gone horribly wrong here. Where was Z for that year that he was gone? What happened? Why is he now acting in these bizarre ways when he comes back and like talking in these cryptic riddles and things like that, which are just fantastically done. Like that whole scene is so spooky and uncanny, and I love it. And they play the game of hide and seek on a friend's suggestion, and while they're waiting for Z to come out of the house. And they have all these rules. And their game of hide and seek has way more rules than I remember there ever being. So please let me know if this is how you played hide and seek, or if they just kind of made up some extra rules for the purpose of the story, because it is plot relevant that this game has rules. But there's like a whole bunch of additional things about this version of hide and seek that I was never played. Like, the way I played hide and seek was a bunch of people would go hide, you would seek, and when you found somebody, they were out, and whoever was the last hider remaining was the winner and would get to be seeker next. This one, they have like, there's a safe zone that you can run to, and you're not supposed to interfere with other players reaching the safe zone, and like a whole bunch of stuff. I don't remember all of the rules, but there's at least 3 or 4 rules. But they play, and all of them end up breaking one of the rules. In some way or another, they break the rules. And that is what draws in the Seeker. So the Seeker is this otherworldly, supernatural entity that is bound to the game hide and seek. And anytime someone plays it and breaks a rule, the Seeker gets to come and claim them. And it takes them away to this horrible world where all of their fears come to life, and they have to just constantly live with this fear that they have, whatever deep-rooted personal fear that they have. And if you thought, well, how is it going to do that with Justin's fear, because he's already faced so much? Oh boy, do they do a lot with that. And I'll get more on that in detail in the spoiler section. So that's the setup. The Seeker is coming and picking off this friend group one by one because they played the game and they broke the rules, and they're trying to figure out how to stop it and get back the people who have been taken, and it's just really interesting. So yeah, I 100% recommend this. I think that it was a fantastic horror story, just an incredible, scary book, very disturbing and unsettling content, but never crossing that line into adults-only territory. Would not give this to younger readers, but if you have youngsters in your life around, that 12, 13 age range, and they're really into horror and they're really into like PG-13 horror movies, I think this would slot in there very nicely. And of course, to match the kind of theme of this video, we are going to pair this book with a visual media property. And the best one that I can think of, honestly, is like the first season of Stranger Things. Not to give too much away, but The Seeker's Realm really has kind of like Upside Down vibes to me. Like, it reminded me very much of the Upside Down. And the idea of like a friend going missing, and then the friend group trying to take action to get that person back or find out what happened to them. And it's not exact. Obviously, this is way more horror, and Stranger Things was way more like science fiction. But if I were to relate this to something that you could go watch, or if something you have watched and enjoyed, then you would probably like reading this book, it would be season 1 of Stranger Things. So if you did like season 1 of Stranger Things, and nothing else in this review has convinced you that you need to go read this book, let that be the recommendation that sways your opinion. Now we are moving into spoilers. So if you do want to read this book, but you don't want to know anything else about it, now is your time to click away from the video or to skip ahead to the next chapter. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that while I review my notes. Alright, so this is where this book went from like, oh, this is pretty good, to this is now my new favorite children's horror book. This might actually be better than Coraline at this point, which is a lot. Okay, I love Neil Gaiman. I love Coraline. But the pacing, the characters of this one just drew me in so much. I was so invested in every single character in this friend group. They all had such distinct personalities, which, you know, not to blame Coraline, but she's going through most of the book by herself, and it just doesn't have that same dynamic appeal to me with the different characters interacting. What I did not expect would happen, that happens at about halfway through the book and then very drastically changes how the rest of the book goes from where I thought it was going to go, is they basically give up. Like, okay, that's not being charitable. They don't give up, but they pretty much figure out, okay, this is a extremely powerful supernatural entity that a bunch of kids have basically no chance of defeating at the moment. Like, they've already lost a couple of people. Literally, like, right in front of them, one of them got taken. So they're like, okay, yeah, nothing we could do about that. So what they do instead is they just kind of accept that, okay, we're gonna end up going to the Seeker's Realm. It's gonna get us. This is inevitable. They actually find someone who was there and got out, and he's a fucking douchebag for that, because the way that he got out, and he's the only person to have done this, and he's like some, I don't know, I imagine him as like a 30-year-old sleazebag. I don't actually remember how he's described, but the way he got out is because he made a deal with the Seeker that he would, if he was set free, basically find more kids to play hide and seek and mess up so that the Seeker could come claim them. And that's what he has been doing in the years since he has been free, and he abandoned his little sister in the Seeker's realm to do this. So not only is he an asshole for screwing over tons of other kids, but specifically also for screwing over his sister, who he was supposed to be protecting. Like, fuck you, man. But anyway, they find him and they talk to him, and he's describing, like, how shitty the Seeker's world is and how it's built on your fears and everything. And they're like, okay, well, if there's any way of defeating this thing, obviously we can't even really perceive it in our world, so that's shot. So what they decide to do is just get a bunch of equipment and make sure it's, like, on them at all times, so that when they get taken, that stuff goes with them. Whatever they're wearing at the time, it goes with them. So they just pack a bunch of, like, survival gear and shit, just put that in a backpack, and they're like, alright, come fucking get me. And then once they are in the Seeker's Realm, they end up meeting all these other people who have also been taken, and making a plan to defeat the Seeker there and free everybody versus only saving themselves. And they also find out what the Seeker's goal is there, and it is that if it collects enough people, it collects enough fear, that's where it draws its power from, it would be able to break into the real world and just fuck it all up. And there's some interesting rules in this place. Like, only you can see the thing that you're afraid of, but everyone else can see the physical effects that it's having on you. And if you touch anybody, you can also see and be affected by their fear. And that is so interesting. I don't think I've ever seen or watched or anything like that before. That is so cool because it adds so many stakes. Well, not stakes necessarily, but like imagine that you've been kidnapped into this very shitty other world, and really the only thing you would want in that world would be just like a hug. like some physical reassurance or comfort from anyone around you, because assumedly you probably got brought there with your friends and or family members, and you can't touch anybody. How isolating that is, how alone that would make you to deal with these fears is just awesome. And the way that they do finally defeat the Seeker is that they all get together and play this massive game of hide and seek, and they do seek out each other, and they do like touch and, you know, have to learn each other's fears on a very visceral level because they have to be able to see what's going on. So they do say, you know, fuck it. I am with you through the worst of what you have to deal with. Like, I'm, no matter how bad it is, I'm here with you. And that is such a strong message. That is just a very wonderful message about dealing with grief and dealing with fears by coming together and not isolating, because so many people who are going through hard times do have a tendency to isolate. It is just kind of part of dealing with things like depression, anxiety, grief, and trauma. Those are very isolating experiences, and that is definitely represented in the Seeker's world with how no one can touch. So the main characters saying fuck that and holding on to each other, it really reinforces that community and togetherness aspect. I thought was a great message. And some of the fears are just really cool. Like, the way that Justin's fear is handled is he sees his mother's very sickly corpse following him around and asking, you know, why is he running away from her? Like, doesn't he love her anymore? And like, wow, what a guilt just inducing. That is so raw and unsettling, especially the way she's described is really unsettling. Another one of their friends, whose name I sadly and ironically cannot remember, had a family member who dealt with dementia. So her biggest fear is dementia. So at random points, she'll just like start forgetting things. And that freaks her out. Lyric is afraid of losing his friends because his friends have been what have gotten him through a hard time because his dad is currently in jail. And like without his friends, he just wouldn't be able to survive, basically. He would not be able to take care of himself. And the way his fear is represented is that there are just times where he cannot see or hear his friends. They could be right next to him, and he can no longer see or hear that they are there. So that they really take some of these metaphysical fears and turn them into very gripping visualizations. So yeah, that's the spoiler part of this review. It was just so amazing. I had no idea where they were gonna go with it after that first half where, you know, so many of them were getting taken, and I was like, okay, how is Justin by himself gonna deal with this? And then having that be what they do, where he just kind of jumps into the mouth of the beast and takes it apart from the inside. That was such a cool twist. I really enjoyed that. I thought this book had a fantastic message. 1000% I would recommend it. If you like anything scary at all, definitely read Hide and Seeker. It is incredible.